I accidentally hired my biological father. I know that sounds impossible, but if someone had told me a year ago that I'd be signing employment papers for the man who helped create me, I would have laughed in their face. What's even crazier is that he knew exactly who I was before I figured it out. For 8 months he worked 10 feet away from me, looked me in the eye almost every day, and carried a secret that could have changed my entire life. He listened to me talk about never knowing my father. He heard me joke about the mystery man who disappeared before I was born. And every single time he stayed silent. The truth finally came out on a rainy Thursday afternoon because of an old photograph that wasn't supposed to exist. But before I tell you how everything fell apart, I need to explain how it started. My name is Emma Carter. I'm 29 years old, and I own a small construction company in Ohio. Growing up, it was always just me and my mom. Whenever people asked about my father, I'd usually avoid the question. Sometimes I'd say he wasn't around. Sometimes I'd say I never met him. Most of the time I just changed the subject. The truth was simple. I had absolutely no idea who he was. My mom never talked about him. Not because she seemed angry. Not because she seemed bitter. She simply refused. Every time I asked, she'd become quiet and find a way to talk about something else. As a child, I thought she was protecting me. As a teenager, I assumed my father must have been a terrible person. As an adult, I told myself I didn't care anymore. But that's not entirely true. No matter how successful your life becomes, there's always a part of you that wonders where you came from. By 29, I built a life I was proud of. My company was growing fast. We had more work than we could handle, which meant I needed to hire another project manager. I interviewed dozens of candidates. Most looked good on paper. Very few impressed me in person. Then Daniel Walker walked into my office. He looked to be around 60. Gray hair. Strong build. Weathered face. The kind of man who looked like he'd spent his entire life working hard. His resume was incredible. Decades of experience. Excellent references. A long history of successful projects. Everything looked perfect. Still, the moment he sat across from me, something felt strange. Not bad. Just familiar. At the time I couldn't explain it. When our eyes met, his expression changed. For a brief second he looked shocked. Then emotional. Then he quickly hid it. I noticed immediately. Everything okay? I asked. He blinked. Yeah. Sorry. Long drive. The interview continued. For the next hour he answered every question perfectly. By the time he left, I already knew he was the best candidate. The next morning I offered him the job. He accepted almost immediately. Looking back now, I often wonder what was going through his mind. Did he recognize my last name? Did he recognize my face? Or did he already know exactly who I was? I may never know. What I do know is that hiring Daniel Walker changed my life forever. The first few months were great. He quickly became one of my most trusted employees. Clients loved him. Workers respected him. Projects ran smoothly. Everything seemed perfect. But there were small things that didn't make sense. Things I ignored at first. Daniel knew details about me that I never remembered sharing. My favorite baseball team. The neighborhood where I grew up. Even foods I hated. One afternoon during lunch, he casually mentioned the elementary school I attended. I stared at him. How do you know where I went to school? For a moment he looked nervous. Then he shrugged. Someone mentioned it. I accepted the answer. But something felt off. Another time he asked about my mother. Not in a casual way. In a way that felt deeply personal. Like every answer mattered. Are you close with your mom? He asked. Very close. He smiled. But there was sadness in it. That's good, he said quietly. Then he looked out the window and didn't say another word for several minutes. Months passed. And the strange feeling never went away. Sometimes I'd catch him looking at me when he thought I wasn't paying attention. Not in a creepy way. More like someone watching a memory. One evening, after everyone else had gone home, I found him sitting alone in the office. He was staring at a framed photograph on my desk. A picture of me and my mother at my college graduation. He didn't notice me at first. Daniel. He jumped. The photograph nearly slipped from his hands. For a split second, I saw tears in his eyes. Then he quickly looked away. Sorry, he said. I was waiting for something to print. I looked at the photo, then at him. Something wasn't right. I could feel it. I just didn't know what. And if I had known the truth hiding behind that photograph, I would have realized that the biggest secret of my life was already sitting in the room with me. The drive home that night felt different. I couldn't stop thinking about Daniel. The way he'd stared at that photograph. The tears. The sadness. It wasn't the reaction of someone looking at a random family picture. It felt personal. That evening I called my mom. We talked about the usual things. Work. Life. Family. Then I mentioned Daniel. I hired this older project manager a few months ago. Great worker but kind of an unusual guy. What do you mean? She asked. I laughed. I don't know. Sometimes he acts like he already knows me. There was a pause. A longer pause than usual. Then she quickly changed the subject. Most people wouldn't have noticed. I did. My mother loved asking questions. This time she seemed eager to move on. The next morning, I arrived at the office early. Daniel was already there. Coffee in hand. Reviewing blueprints. Morning, he said. Morning. A few moments passed. Then he looked up. Do you ever think about your father? The question hit me out of nowhere. I stared at him. What? He immediately looked uncomfortable. Forget I asked. Why would you ask me that? He rubbed the back of his neck. Just making conversation. I laughed nervously. That's a strange way to make conversation. Yeah, he said quietly. The conversation ended. But I couldn't stop thinking about it. For months, Daniel had never asked me anything personal. And suddenly he wanted to talk about my father? It didn't make sense. That weekend, my mom invited me over for dinner. Everything felt normal until I mentioned Daniel again. The moment I said his name, her expression changed. Only for a second. But I noticed. What was his name? She asked. Daniel Walker. The color drained from her face. Mom. She forced a smile. What? Are you okay? Of course. I didn't believe her. Not even for a second. For the first time in my life, I wondered if my mother knew more about my father than she'd ever admitted. A few days later, while searching through an old storage warehouse for company records, I found a cabinet filled with my grandfather's belongings. Inside were several photo albums. I flipped through them casually. Then I found a photograph I'd never seen before. The moment I looked at it, my stomach dropped. It showed my mother when she was young, standing beside a man. A young man. Tall. Dark hair. His arm wrapped around her waist. Both smiling. At first, I couldn't understand why the photo felt familiar. Then it hit me. The man looked exactly like Daniel. Younger. But unmistakably him. My hands started shaking. I flipped the photo over. Written on the back were 4 words. Summer 1996. Me and Daniel. I stopped breathing. Everything suddenly made sense. The questions. The looks. The photograph on my desk. The emotion in his eyes. Every strange moment came rushing back. I drove straight to the office. Daniel was sitting in the conference room. The moment he saw the photograph in my hand, all color disappeared from his face. I placed it on the table between us. Who are you? For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Then he looked at the picture. Then at me. His eyes filled with emotion. Finally, he whispered, I was wondering when you'd find that. And in that moment I knew. The biggest secret of my life was finally about to be revealed.